What is going on, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit back at it with another video. Today, we are talking about the Las Vegas Raiders against the Arizona Cardinals. And we're going to talk about some of the players that I'm pretty sure are going to get released based off of some of their performances. We're also going to talk about one guy who I think absolutely has to make this roster. I think he's so much better than the credit he's getting based off the tape we've seen over the last 2 weeks specifically. Let's talk about this, man. So I did not expect the Raiders to roll out there with their first team offense. Truth be told, did not expect it. And even more than that, the first team defense went out there. Both units played one drive, and the Raiders on the offensive side literally drove right downfield and scored a touchdown. Now, of course, it was against the Arizona Cardinals backup players, so I think that just kind of makes sense, right? Backups for starters. This is kind of what's going to end up happening. You know, the first and second play weren't great, right? The first play was just a 1-yard gain. The second play was an incomplete pass to Kobe Myers. 3rd and 9, literally against Arizona Cardinals backups. I thought the Raiders were about to go 3 now. I was about to be super disappointed. But Geno Smith put that trust in Dont'e Thornton, and he got it done. You know, the corner was obviously holding him because the penalty was thrown on this play. But Dont'e Thornton still does a phenomenal job on this play. Even though you're being held, even though this guy's all over you, you still have to go out there and try to make that catch. You got to try to break the contact. You got to try to detach from that guy because there's not guaranteed that the referee's going to throw that flag and give you that pass interference or holding penalty. Either way, Geno Smith was able to put that trust in Thornton. He hits him, and the Raiders pick up a first down. Geno Smith, I think, trusts Dont'e Thornton more than any other wide receiver, which is kind of crazy to me. I think there's a real chance Thornton's going to end up being the Raiders' #1 wide receiver this season. And I'm not talking about like the X wide receiver. I'm talking about the true #1 wide receiver, the guy that gets the most targets. I think there's a real chance Geno Smith has that trust in Dont'e Thornton based off of some of what we're kind of seeing. And it wasn't just today. If you guys just think about the preseason, right? Geno Smith played in every single game up to this point. Think about all those deep shots that he's taking with Thornton. Think about all the opportunities that Thornton is essentially getting. And we know Geno Smith. Geno Smith doesn't want to throw 5, 6, 7-yard passes in the middle of the field. That's not his game. Geno Smith wants to push the ball downfield. I think there's a real chance Thornton's going to end up being our leading wide receiver this season. So we'll see what ends up happening with that as we kind of get into it. But 3rd and 9, you're essentially going to pick up the first down. 1st and 10, the Raiders are going to run outside zone towards the right. The movement on this play is absolutely incredible. From the right guard to the left tackle, look at the movement that these guys are generating. That right there is exactly what the Raiders need on every single outside zone run concept. You got to generate movement, and really it's like Miller does a phenomenal job. Center guard do an okay job. JPJ does a really good job. The movement by those 4 guys on that play is really good. And I think I've come to the conclusion, I shouldn't say I come to the conclusion because I've been saying this, but I hope you guys also have come to the conclusion that Colt Miller is one of the best run blocking offensive tackles in the NFL. I've said this multiple times on this channel, and I always get pushed back by people in the comments saying Colt Miller's, he's not an elite run blocker. But there's so many plays you can watch on tape when this guy just dominates people. And he makes smart plays at the same time, which you guys will see here in a second. But after that 1st and 10 play by Ashton Jeanty does come off the field. He doesn't play any more plays for the Raiders. The Raiders only have a couple more plays after that anyways. Zamir White, RB2 in this game, comes in, has 2 nice runs. Interestingly, when Ashton Jeanty got his 2 carries, there were zone concepts. And when Zamir White came in and he got his 2 carries, they were actually power-based concepts, which is kind of interesting, right? You get the guard to pull out here. He kicks out the defensive end. The second one's going to be duo. You get into a good spot, right? Because you're able to pick the first down up. You run the football now 3 straight plays. And 1st and 10, Geno Smith decides that he's going to make a Geno Smith caliber play. I want to just talk about this play a little bit because it's really impressive. The way Geno Smith kind of goes through his reads on this play, I'm going to be the first to tell you guys, I criticized Derek Carr so much on this channel over the years. And when I started really criticizing him back in like 2019-ish, 2020, a lot of people, especially at that time, were like, dude, you're crazy. Like, Derek Carr is really fast, he's quick, and he can make plays, and he does it. And I always said Derek Carr doesn't make plays with his legs. And I only ever meant that he doesn't extend plays. When the initial read is not there, Derek Carr does not make that extra play. And this is a great example of a quarterback that does make the extra play. Think about this play right here. Geno Smith literally starts off looking to his right, doesn't like what he sees. He looks right in the middle of the field, doesn't like what he sees, looks to the left, looks to his check down, doesn't want to take any of that. So he flips around and gets out of there. And at the same time, Michael Mayer ends up seeing this, and he kind of comes back towards Geno, and Geno gives him a 50-50 chance. I just throws it high, and hopefully Mayer can out jump that corner. And that's exactly what ends up happening. Yes, it was 1st and 10, but there'll be 3rd and 10 plays or 3rd and 5 plays where your initial read isn't really there, and it's going to be up to a quarterback to make that extra play. We've seen Aidan O'Connell struggle with this a little bit. Aidan O'Connell yesterday literally tried to make an extra play, and he got chased down and strip sacked. And that's the exact reason why I say Aidan O'Connell is not an NFL caliber quarterback, and why the Raiders cannot rely on him. You know, it's one thing if you're playing backups, and you know, and more than that, if you're a backup quarterback, it's different. But like long term, you want to have success. The NFL is always going to come down to these little plays, right? Those extra plays, as an example. You know, I watched Patrick Mahomes against the Bears 2 days ago. Mahomes dropped 17 points in the first quarter on the Bears. It was first team offense versus first team defense. The Bears had every single first team player out there. And what I saw from Patrick Mahomes was just this. The guy literally just created plays. He had like a 17-yard run on one play. He had a 25-yard pass on the next. Had a 58-yard pass as well within that. Patrick Mahomes makes plays. And I think with Geno Smith, the thing that I noticed is this guy also can kind of make plays. Now, Geno's not Patrick Mahomes, but there's a way to have success and, you know, have an efficient offense as long as you're able to do these type of plays, right? So I was really impressed with that play. I just kind of watching the tape and looking at Geno's eyes and the helmet and how he kind of goes through the reads. It impressed me. So with that, of course, you pick up 9 yards. The Raiders run it twice, and then you're in a 2nd and 4 situation. And Geno Smith ends up throwing a 50-50 jump ball to Dante Thornton. Geno throws this early, right? Like Thornton's not even really there at the point where he's like looking back. And what's crazy about this play is the cornerback that's on Thornton is 5'10". Right, that's Denzel Burke, came out of Ohio State. I think he's a rookie this year. You can just see the difference, right? The height difference. Like Thornton, 6'5", there's 7-inch difference between him and that cornerback. You know, if you really think about this play, the cornerback's reaching all the way up. He's trying to get as high as he can possibly get. Thornton doesn't even look like he jumped, right? Or jumped that high. Or, you know, he didn't like extend his arms all the way up. But he just took the ball right away from this cornerback. To me, that play's impressive as hell from Thornton, man. I really, really, really like what I've seen from Thornton this preseason. He does still have to develop, though. He's not the perfect quarterback or wide receiver. He's not, like, elite as a route runner. He's not elite as, like, you know, a guy that can make plays with the ball in his hands. But I will say this, and he's not even elite when it comes to his hands, right? We've seen him kind of struggle a little bit. But I will say that Geno Smith clearly trusts him, and I think as Thornton develops that confidence and he continues to develop as a wide receiver, I think he's going to be a really, really good football player for the Raiders. So we'll see how that just kind of continues as we go forward. Let's talk about the defense. So the Raiders' first-team defense did play yesterday. I believe it was the first week against the Seahawks where the Raiders had their first-team defense in. And the Seahawks had like 14 plays, and they drove right downfield on us. And then, of course, Isaiah Paul-Mount ended up getting an interception to stop that first drive. I believe that's what it was. Maybe got an interception on the second drive. But, you know, just think about that Seahawks game and that defense, right? It was the first team defense, and the Seahawks went down on us twice. To what we saw yesterday against the Cardinals backups, the Raiders' first team defense just dominated these guys. And this is what you would expect, right? We're 3 games in at this point. We're 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks of practice in at this point with full pads. The Raiders players are kind of getting things under their belt, right? The defensive lines will be a little bit faster. The safeties and corners will be a little bit faster. They're going to understand the scheme just a little bit more because we're, you know, multiple weeks past this at this point. Raiders come out, interestingly, in base defense, and there's no Malcom, Koonce, or Tyree Wilson on that first and 10 play. Instead, they go with 3 defensive tackles, which is kind of interesting. First play, first 10, Adam Butler swats the pass, and it's an incomplete pass. Really good job by Butler, but I like the fact that the Raiders came out with 3 defensive tackles. And it's base defense, right? So you have a linebacker that's going to be on the line of scrimmage. It's going to contain the outside gap. But base defense nonetheless, right? And another thing to kind of just note is Terrell Edmunds did get the start for the Raiders yesterday. Jeremy Chin did not play, which was kind of interesting. But Jeremy Chin did not play. Terrell Edmunds got the start. And Edmunds actually lined up as the big nickel, which is the Jeremy Chin role. Jeremy Chin is the big nickel. Yesterday it was Terrell Edmunds that lined up essentially down in the in the box and on the line of scrimmage. To me, it was just kind of interesting to see Terrell Edmunds kind of play that role. Darian Porter, Eric Stokes got the start, and then Polamalu ended up starting at the post safety position. Second down play, Maxx Crosby just kind of did some Maxx Crosby things. Malcolm Koonce did come in on that second play, and Jonah Laulu ended up coming out. But second down play, man, it's crazy to me because this is back-to-back weeks that, you run these pin pull concepts towards Maxx Crosby. Not going to work, man. He's just too fast. He's too quick. He's, slippery, even though he's super long and tall. He's just too good, right? You can't run these type of concepts where you're trying to crack down on Crosby with the wide receiver. That is a backup wide receiver. Maxx blows it up. Now you're in a 3rd and 17 if you're the Arizona Cardinals. You're not going to pick the first down on 3rd and 17 for the most part. But they ended up running a screen play. And the screen just kind of got blown up because Adam Butler pushed his offensive lineman. And he kind of recognized the screen pretty quickly. The running back kind of, stumbled a little bit. Quarterback didn't really see where the running back ended up going. And then even then, Jermaine Pratt comes downhill. He ends up kind of getting all over that. It was a 3rd and 17 screen play. And with that, both Butler and Pratt did a phenomenal job being able to just kind of get there. And then you had the rest of the defense that kind of swarmed to the football. I will say with the Raiders this season, there's a lot of players that are showing high effort. They're running to the football. And I think that's one of the underrated traits in the NFL. If you're not a great pass rusher, you're not a great run defender, if you show high effort, you can make plays and you'll have success, right? Maxx Crosby was always a really, really high effort player early on in his career. And he had pass rush technique, but he wasn't an elite run defender. But because he had high effort, he was chasing plays down, backside, and he was making plays just because of that high effort. So I love the fact that the Raiders have some players that are high effort. Second drive, most of the starters are out, but you still have some guys out there on the field, right? Malcom Koonce played 14 snaps yesterday, so he played, 2 more drives after this. Tyree Wilson played, I think, 25, 26 snaps. So he played the entire first half. Jonah Laulu was out there in the second drive as well. Carl Edmonds kind of stayed on the field. Darian Porter as well. First and second down, the Cardinals pick up 4 or 5 yards, right? Just a run play, quick game. They get into a 3rd and 5 situation, and Malcom Koonce ends up winning, beating the left tackle when he gets a sack from the quarterback. Phenomenal play by Malcom Koonce. And I want to go ahead and just take this moment to make the shift over. I don't want to talk about, every Aidan McConnell drive or every Clayton Tune, whatever drive. I don't care about that, right? But I do want to talk about some individual performances. And we'll start right away with Malcom Koonce. Koonce, to me, looked phenomenal yesterday. He played 14 snaps. I watched every single one of his snaps. The guy had so many winning plays. And it doesn't always translate to sacks, right? Because some plays are quick game. Some plays are plays where the quarterback quickly gets ball out, or maybe it's a designed bootleg, so you might beat the guy that's coming out towards you, but the play's away from you, so there's nothing you can really do. Malcom Koonce had so many winning reps. He may be in his 14 snaps, he probably lost, I would say, 2 plays, and they weren't terrible plays. He just didn't do a good job making the play when it came towards him, right? And it's just little things he can kind of clean up. Obviously, I understand he still has the whole knee issue. It's just going to take a little bit of time for him to mentally feel right. But you see the technique, you see the pass rush potential. He obviously ended up beating that left tackle with a single-hand swipe. What's interesting about that move is I've actually seen Malcom Koonce use this move a lot in the preseason. I do remember he used this move twice against Rashawn Slater in the past, but he's fine-tuned this move, right? Some people call it a club move. I call it a single-hand swipe. A really good job by Malcom Koonce, right? He ends up beating that left tackle, and he used that same move a couple times yesterday where he's able to generate a little bit of pressure or at least just beat his guy. He had a couple of nice run reps as well. He was able to either make the tackle or he set the front side gap. He did a really good job yesterday, and I just want to give a big shout out to Malcom Koonce because coming back from the injury he came back from is hard, and he's playing now for the Raiders, and it might take him some time, but I think eventually he'll get to the point where he's consistently making plays. Remember, Malcom Koonce is supposed to be our second best defensive end. He's supposed to be our second best, defensive lineman at this point, right? Malcom Koonce was elite in that year where he played, started that second half where Antonio Pierce took over. Let's see if he can get back to form, right? I'm really, really excited for him. Let's talk about Tyree Wilson a little bit. 24 snaps. The guy's an elite run defender. We all know, right? And yesterday he made run plays once again, right? He's a guy that's going to come downhill if he's the backside guy. Even if you try using the tight end to reach block him, it's not going to really work because Tyree Wilson's just stronger and bigger, and he's just better than a lot of tight ends in run concepts specifically. Tyree Wilson was being Tyree Wilson. Now, he did play 24 snaps, which was the entire first half. But Tyree Wilson, I think, at this point is what Tyree Wilson is, right? He doesn't really bring much as a pass rusher. And I continuously say this, and I will continuously say this. Tyree Wilson just has no pass rush game, man. There's just so many plays, even against backup offensive tackles, where he just does not do anything. He locks in with guys, he tries to push guys, and that's it. And to me, it's kind of crazy because I watched Andre Carter snaps yesterday, and yes, Carter played against like the third string unit while Tyree Wilson was playing against the second team unit. Andre Carter flashes so much more than Tyree Wilson does. I think there's a real chance Andre Carter is actually better than Tyree Wilson. Now, I think Tyree Wilson is a much better run defender for sure, but I don't think run defense matters all that much. I think run defense is a little overrated because there's 1,000 guys out there that can defend the run. But there's only probably like 40, 50 guys that can effectively pass rush, and Andre Carter is probably one of those guys. And he's still only in his third year. He hasn't played a lot of snaps in the NFL. But if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders, Andre Carter is the guy that I'm keeping on this roster. I think Andre Carter has so much more upside than even Tyree Wilson, right? And I say all that because, to me, pass rush matters so much more, especially in our division when you have Patrick Mahomes out there, where you have Justin Herbert out there, even Bo Nix. Some people think it's going to be one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. You have to be fast and you have to be quick. And there's, just multiple examples of this where, teams are running like bootlegs to the right, bootlegs to the left. And, if you're the front side defensive end on a bootleg and it's to your side, you need to quickly change direction and get your ass to that quarterback and bring that quarterback down or close the distance. Tyree struggles with changing direction and then getting back to speed and chasing quarterbacks down. Andre Carter does not, right? And, it's just little things like that. Carter had 2 sacks yesterday, multiple pressures. To me, I think Andre Carter has more upside as a pass rusher. And, to me, I always take pass rush over run defense. And Carter's just been flashing this entire preseason, right? Of all the younger guys, right? All the guys that, were like cut candidates, essentially. Cody Lindenbergs, the Tommy Eichenbergs, the Greedy Vances, the Andre Carters. To me, by far, Andre Carter has stood out. And I think he's the guy that definitely deserves a roster spot. And I know Charles Snowden is pretty solid himself. And he's young too, right? Let's not overlook that. And I think Charles Snowden should still be probably our third or fourth guy, right? Like with Tyree. And Carter shouldn't necessarily leap those 2 guys, but he should be our 5th guy. If anyone gets hurt, he should have playing time this season. I think he's well worth the effort to keep. Another guy that looked pretty good yesterday was Tonka Hemingway. 2 quarterback hits yesterday, 4 pressures, and I watched all 6 of those snaps. I would say like 2 of them probably aren't real plays that Tonka Hemingway made. They're like cleanup type things or a quarterback runs to him. But Tonka Hemingway actually looked good. He had multiple run reps. He had multiple pass rush reps. I know he's a rookie, and I don't think he should start over Jonah Laulu at this point. But I do think that Tonka Hemingway long-term is honestly, and Adam Butler's not going to be here that much longer, right? I think Butler's like approaching 30 if he's not already 30. Hemingway is probably going to be our best defensive tackle in 2 years, in my opinion. I think he's going to be the best D tackle we have on this roster, unless we draft the guy in the first round, right? Caleb Banks, Florida. If you guys don't know who he is, Google him. Phenomenal pass rusher. Probably the next Jalen Carter, right? Early on, at least. I think unless the Raiders draft the defensive tackle, Tonka Hemingway may be the guy for the Raiders. And I like his tape. I really, really, really like his tape. The guy flashed yesterday against the Cardinals. 3 other guys that kind of flashed. I don't want to get too much into these guys. Greedy Vance, Cody Lindenberg, and Colt Miller. All 3 of these guys absolutely flashed. And we've already talked about Miller a little bit. But Greedy Vance had a sack on a design blitz concept, right? The edge player goes downwards. Greedy Vance comes off the edge. The running back does a pretty good job kind of getting out there, picking it up, but Vance does a good job fighting through it and eventually kind of gets the sack. He had a pressure on another play. He was okay in coverage. I still think Vance needs to develop. I don't think he's locked in to be on the roster. I do think he's locked in to be on the practice squad. Same with Cody Lindenberg. I'm not sure if he's locked in, but he had like 5-6 tackles yesterday for the Raiders. So he was kind of all over it, making plays. I'm not sure if those 2 guys are locked in for the roster, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're both on the practice squad. I say Colt Miller's an elite run blocker. I think the offensive line's also kind of set at this point. I think the 5 guys that started for the Raiders yesterday, I think those are the 5 starters. Alex Kappa did play. He was okay. He wasn't bad. He wasn't terrible. He looked like an offensive lineman that was playing for the first time, right? It looks like he just put his pads on last week, which technically he did. So we'll see what ends up happening with those guys and just kind of, wrapping this video up. 3 other guys, right? If you guys watched my video, when did I post it? I think I posted it on Friday. I said these are the guys that had to kind of impress a little bit. Thayer Munford is one of those guys. So he has to show up. He has to flash. And he definitely did not flash, right? He looked awful. He played 122 snaps this preseason. I think there's a real chance Thayer Munford in those 122 snaps lost like 30 snaps. I'm talking about just straight up lost. I'm not talking about double team blocks or because there's a lot of those snaps. I think just one-on-ones, guys just straight up lost. Thayer Munford had a terrible, terrible, terrible preseason in my opinion. And the unfortunate thing with the, how the Raiders offensive tackles have kind of developed at this point is who's our third tackle at this point? Is it Parker Clements, the rookie? Is it Charles Grant, the other rookie who's, still raw, has upside, but he's still raw? Is it Dalton Wagner? I don't think it's Dalton Wagner. I think he's way too flat-footed. He's not that quick. He doesn't have good movement. Is it by default Thayer Munford? Which to me kind of sucks, right? The Raiders, and it's understandable. We drafted Charles Grant. You're not going to go out there and say, hey, we need to get a third offensive tackle that could be essentially our third guy, right? When you draft Charles Grant. Right? The hope is that Charles Grant develops and he can start. That's the hope. Now, he hasn't developed, and I don't think he's there yet for the Raiders, but then who's that third offensive tackle? I don't think it's Dalton Wagner. I definitely don't think it's Thayer Munford. Although I think Wagner maybe has a little bit more upside than Munford. Munford's played a lot more than Wagner. So you got to kind of factor those 2 things in. If I'm making the decision, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I would rather just roll out with Charles Grant, given that the Raiders are developing Charles Grant long-term to be the starter anyways. There's no way to get better than just kind of being thrown out there and to get your ass kicked a little bit. We saw this with Colt Miller where he came out and gave up 25, 30 sacks his first 2 seasons. Really struggled. I think the best way to get better is to get your ass kicked a little bit. And I know it would suck if Charles Grant's out there and he's getting his ass kicked. But that's why you can also chip and help Charles Grant out, right? But the only unfortunate thing is if Charles Grant comes in for Colt Miller, well, you have DJ Glazen. How much help does he need as well, right? Because you can't help both guys on every play. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. I do think the Raiders are probably going to just roll with Charles Grant as their backup offensive tackle. He'll be the swing guy, I guess, at this point, unless they keep Dalton Wagner on the practice squad, or even Thayer Munford potentially on the practice squad. But I think with Thayer Munford, if he is released, there's a chance he gets picked up by someone else, right? I think there's teams out there that value guys that have played 2,000 snaps in the NFL, right? We'll see what ends up happening with the offensive tackle position, specifically the backups. Zamir, Raheem, Mostert were 2 other guys I spoke about in the video that I posted on Friday, and I said, I need to see both of these guys step up. I need to know that these guys are RB2 for the Raiders, and both guys kind of stepped up. Raheem Mostert, obviously, is Raheem Mostert. I think Zamir White looks a lot better than Mostert. Now, Mostert did have, some bigger chunk plays. Mostert's the guy that's going to run zone, and that's all he's going to run. And he's going to pick up, if the offensive line blocks it for 8 yards, he's going to pick up 8 yards. If the offensive lineman blocks it for 2 or 3 yards, he's going to pick up 2 or 3 yards. He's not going to break tackles, he's not going to make plays outside of what's kind of designed in front of it for him. And it makes sense. He's a running back that's super, 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 on the older side for running backs. Zamir White's younger. He's much more in shape. He's fitter. But Zamir White is more of a power-based guy, right? I think he's more of a one-cut, hit the hole, put your pads down, and pick up 4 or 5 yards. Which I think for this season is not terrible, right? You just kind of make it work. I think the best thing the Raiders can do is, every single week, have 2 or 3 jet sweeps and those type of concepts. Maybe it's some other type of motions, and you throw a guy, a screen where maybe he's behind the quarterback, and you kind of throw him the football and see if he can make a play. I think the Raiders are going to go into this season. We're not going to have 2 explosive running backs. We're not the Dolphins. We're not the Seahawks. We're not the 49ers, right? They just made a trade for Brian Robinson. We're not going to have 2 explosive running backs. But what we will have is we'll have Ashton Jeanty, who's explosive. We'll have a bunch of weapons on offense, right? Michael Mayer, Jacoby Myers, Dante Thornton, Brock Bowers. And then you can give some other guys some handoffs, and you won't really have a true running back that's super, super explosive. And maybe Mostert takes a play here or there if it's blocked well, but even more than that, I'm still not 100% sold. These guys are the long term, but I think for this year they're good enough. Right, Zamir had a couple of nice runs yesterday. Mostert had a couple of nice runs, so I think the Raiders are okay at the running back position. We'll see what ends up happening this season, man. I'm very, very, very excited for this season. Preseason's over, which means we're 2 weeks away now from the actual regular season. Cuts are supposed to happen on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We might see some cuts actually happen before that. Some teams have done it literally the very next day. I'm pretty sure the Raiders already know, like, hey, these 10 guys are definitely not making the roster. They might inform those guys today. We'll see what ends up happening. Also, Aidan has, I believe it was his wrist. He broke his wrist, so he's out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. He's going to be placed on the injured reserve to start the season. He'll have to make the 53-man roster. He'll be placed on injured reserve. I'm okay with Geno Smith and Cam Miller as your two quarterbacks. I know Tommy Milot's technically not a quarterback, but if he's on this roster, which I guess is another thing, he might not make the roster either. But if he's on this roster, he could be your emergency third quarterback, right? You just run the ball 7 times or whatever. If both quarterbacks end up getting hurt, you're not winning that game anyways. If that happens, right, in a real situation. But it also probably makes sense to have a third quarterback. I think you can carry a quarterback to every game. That doesn't count against the actual active roster, right? They're like that third emergency quarterback. So we might actually go out there and get another quarterback. And it is important to note, Carter Bradley was with the Raiders, and we cut him, right? I think before before preseason even begun, or even before training camp. I don't remember when we cut him. We cut him a long, long, long time ago. But he was picked up by the 49ers. Now, the 49ers have Brock Purdy. They have Mac Jones. I don't know if they have another quarterback outside of Carter Bradley. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe the Raiders bring him back if he does end up getting cut. There's another quarterback that the 49ers have. Or they might even just look to potentially trade for another quarterback. The Browns have, I think, 5 quarterbacks. They have Deshaun Watson. They have Kenny Pickett. They have the 2 rookies. And they have Joe Flacco. Flacco's the expected starter, which means there's 4 other quarterbacks, and they're not going to carry 5 quarterbacks. Chances are Shedeur Sanders is going to end up getting cut. And I know some people don't want to hear this, but I wouldn't mind bringing him in. I definitely would not mind. But there's also a chance that they say, hey, we're going to just keep Shedeur. We're going to keep Gabriel. Gabriel looked a lot better. I think he's more of I think he's a better quarterback at this point than Shedeur. And they might keep both. And they might say, hey, we're going to release Kenny Pickett. And if that's the case, I wouldn't mind bringing him in either, right? So we'll just see what ends up kind of happening as we go forward. I do think the Raiders will probably add a quarterback, given you need 3 quarterbacks to kind of be out there. So we'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.